Thank you all for joining us for our Block Association meeting. I think this is going to be a very informative event. There's going to be folks coming in throughout the evening. So we're going to get started with Landmark West. But let me first say, for Block Association voting members, please be sure to have filled out a ballot. And for those of you who aren't on our mailing list, please take a moment to make sure that you sign in and that we have your information so that we can share everything with you. So without further ado, let's get right into it. As you know, our neighborhood advocate, Landmark West, has been leading the charge in our zoning challenge. So I'm going to introduce you to Sean Khorsandi, who's been the point person on that, and he's going to give us an update and share some technical details and let us know where we're going with this. Sean?
So hi everybody, you probably have met me several times already. So again, and I will be brief. We are with Landmark West. We're turning 35 next year. We are the neighborhood advocate. We started off mainly focusing on preservation of the Upper West Side, and now that 70% of it's preserved, we're still nipping at the edges, but we're focusing a lot more on general land use issues. And those of you who are on our mailing list probably saw this postcard around the holidays. It was focusing on how a building went from 25 stories to 39, but the equivalent of 77 in 620 days. It literally grew 8.4 inches a day. We asked you to mail these to Rick Chandler, who unfortunately is no longer the commissioner of the Department of Buildings. His last day was February 1st. So we have lovely cards if you want extras, because these are all moot. But he adds another layer of people who's updating his resume on LinkedIn. There's a lot of people leaving and moving around in this current administration. I was just sent a link to a replacement. The NYCHA chairman, Stanley Brezinoff, just rendered his resignation on the 11th, which is today. So it's a busy time, and we're in a funny time with the city because most of our electeds are term limited. I think 45 of the 51 council members are term limited right now, and we have a mayor who's done a lot of key initiatives, mainly some of the Vision Zero work and his work for universal pre-K, and he's made his state of what he wants out of land use, but he's not really pushing through any new initiatives right now. So we're dealing with some of maybe the fallout of the aftermath of some of his prior issues, and we're trying to pick up the pieces of where we are and move forward for the remaining term. So the issue at hand that we've been talking about is around the corner. The 65th, 66th Street super tall site by Extell development. It started off as a smaller 25-story building, and through various zoning law mergers, transfer of development rights, and magic, has evolved into what was announced in January of a year ago as a new 775-foot tower, which would be the tallest building on the Upper West Side. And if you've been following the fight, we've been following and pushing back at every moment we could. Landmark West filed a DOB challenge. We had 5 points that we were resting on, challenging the validity of this tower. The DOB thought it was no problem whatsoever. We actually did this with our neighbors at 10 West 66th Street, who has been great partners throughout all of this, and there have been many instrumental neighbors as well. The 10 West 66 split that with us, and our work with George James, who prepared that. And he's tipped off new areas that have never been touched on in the fight against super talls, primarily work with the fire department and the actual safety of these. We're not talking about the safety of falling glass, which is happening at the Central Park Tower by the same developer, or a hanging crane in the street during Superstorm Sandy, which is the same developer, or a flipping backhoe on this site, which is the same developer, or any of these other issues of safety. We're talking about what happens when you have 161 foot of void sandwiched between two other mechanical floors, and what happens to someone carrying 45 plus pounds of gear walking up that. What does that mean for the response time of those first responders who are now not attending to other people in other buildings because they're busy walking in an MC Escher stairway? So there's lots of questions about that, and the biggest attack we've gotten or complaint is you can't change the rules mid-game. First of all, this is not a game, this is life. Second of all, when are the rules supposed to change? Right? City planning is allowed and should be doing their job. For many intents and purposes, it's taken 15 months for the current action that they've pushed forward, which is to limit mechanical voids. And with their proposal that they just certified on January 28th was to limit the inter-building void to 25 feet. So that means you can put whatever you want below street level to the Earth's core. You can put anything you want above the penthouse up to the sky and the ozone. But within the body of the building, you can only have a void, mechanical void assigned for 25 feet in height. And that can, for some reason unknown to me, repeat every 75 feet. You can do it more frequently than that, but it'll count against your floor area. So city planning has pursued this. We have a lot of support from the electeds. It's not an ideal scenario, but it's definitely something we want to accept and work with and expand from. And this is a first major step where city planning is finally listening to the community. They're reacting to people, boots on the ground, the people who live here. It's not for the future people who may live here or for the foreign investment who may park their money here. It's the people who actually have to breathe all this construction dust and hear all this noise and be disrupted by it. So we're very excited by that. That's happening in tandem with our fight against this particular development. And this development is a snapshot of what's happening here, but this is indicative of a citywide fight, and this is the one that's on our doorstep. So that's primarily what we're talking about. But we have other colleagues. The Committee for Environmentally Sound Development and the Municipal Arts Society are fighting a development at 200 Amsterdam, which has a case of a grotesquely gerrymandered zoning lot. There's split lots and partial zoning lots on East 88th Street. There's buildings with stilts on East 62nd Street. There's other scenarios of voids or interior atria within residential buildings. And these are all on the thin edge of the law. They're not what the city says you can't do. The developers are more like saying, show me I can't do it. You know, and this is part of the problem with the ways the rules and the laws are written right now. When we had the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, our ancestors, our predecessors, that changed the fire codes. When Jacob Riis exposed the living conditions in tenements, that changed the tenement laws. We need a city planning and Department of Buildings agencies that are proactive and on the offensive, not the defensive. And we can't just wait and see what happens when a 775-foot building collides with failing infrastructure, clogged streets, fire hazards, etc. So we're trying to push for just smart planning and realistic things. We're not trying to change the rules mid-game, we're trying to get the rule makers to do their job. And that's so far what city planning has begun regarding these voids. So there's still a lot of work to do, but there's two important dates if you want to mark your calendar. Wednesday, February 20th is when this will come before land use, CD7. You don't have to go to the meeting, you don't have to flood the meeting, but if you want to send your support, that would be great. Alternately, on Tuesday, March 5th, they will have a full board meeting on this. And it's important just to say that you support this or why you think this is an important move in the right direction. And it's by no means an ideal document, but it's a good start, and it's something that we're looking forward to continuing and building off of. So as this is happening, that's one parallel track. We had our Department of Buildings challenge denied. So we argued against this building on 5 grounds. One was a courtyard, one was fire safety, one was the way there was over 41,000 square feet of additional floor area that shouldn't have been there. There was a whole laundry list of things we put in this challenge. And we had to do that on a certain calendar in reaction to the filing of a ZD1 document. A ZD1 is a very technical term, but the developer filed it basically as a placeholder saying this is what I intend to build. And there wasn't a lot of detail. They can always be amended later. And they filed this not as a new building, but as an amendment to a prior 25-story filing that was on 4 of the 5 lots on this block. We did that challenge. The DOB came back and said no. And we, within our time frame, filed a BSA challenge, a Board of Standards and Appeals. And the Board of Standards and Appeals is great for many reasons, one of which is you can argue the intent of the zoning law here. And we were saying that they never intended to have the equivalent of a 16-story void within a building shaft. We are arguing several points, among them the tower coverage. There's a split zoning lot between the north and south side of the block. The south side can only be up to 25 stories. The north portion is commercially zoned with a very tall residential equivalent. But there's rules within zoning. So you can a tower, for example, must cover at least 30% of a lot, but no more than 40%. And the way that they've accumulated floor area from the Armory building they've actually gotten too much floor area that they can actually properly use within the zoning of the site. So they're in a conundrum. They either have to leave some on the table or build less, or keep going and fight it at the BSA. Anybody can fight anything at the BSA, it just takes money. And that's partly where we are today in talking to you. We're right now in the midst of raising a huge chunk of money to pay our consultants and our lawyers for this challenge and this appeal, and right now it's in limbo. So to catch you up, this was filed December 20th, and we were waiting for the Board of Standards and Appeals comments on our filing. And the filing had 3 points. One was tower coverage and what's called packing the bulk. There's special rules within the Lincoln Square Special Zoning District, which this is part of, which means although there's existing zoning, we have special zoning in this area because this area has a distinct, unique quality and character. And part of those rules say that there should be buildings from mid-20 to 32 stories in height. So although this building is the equivalent of a 77-story tower, it'll be 39 stories, so it's already in violation of the intent of the rules. So we can argue intent at the Board of Standards and Appeals. We can also argue the intent of this void as an accessory use. So you're allowed to have certain accessory uses. Maybe your building has a laundry room or a children's playroom or a party room. We're seeing now wine tasting rooms, golf simulation rooms, and the argument has been we're not far from trapeze schools, bungee jumping, or skydiving simulators, right? And then when you think about a 161-foot void, it's very possible. And when you think about that 161 void is one of 3 mechanical floors stacked together. So that was one argument, and the other argument was life safety. So as this train has been moving along very slowly, and we're waiting for our comments, the DOB threw us a curveball. And the Department of Buildings said they issued an intent notice to revoke. They didn't share it with us. We got it secondhand through the Board of Standards and Appeals, which basically puts our Board of Standards and Appeals argument on ice. So in order to challenge something, you have a series of steps that you must make before it can take legal action. You have to complete the DOB and get a final determination, which we did. You proceed to the Board of Standards and Appeals, and we were about to argue those points when we got sent back. Do not pass go, do not collect $200, go directly to jail, right? So we're waiting now for the DOB. At this point, we would have a new DOB challenge after this final determination, potentially. And although our life safety health issues are still valid, the tower coverage is still valid, the way the city sees this is, well, we've issued this intent notice to revoke, so this is all mooted. And that's a maybe. That's a gray area right now, because we're slightly in uncharted territory. So the developer has 15 days from January 14th to respond, which those of you with iPads will know that that has eclipsed on the 29th. So if anybody takes any solace in it, or schadenfreude, the developer is supposedly getting fines every day while they are trying to justify or explain why they need this 161-foot void. So those are some of the issues of where we are right now. It's not that it's a waiting game, but there's still other strategy that's pushing forth. We're still arguing life safety arguments. Even if all of this clears the Department of Buildings and proceeds to the BSA, there's still questions of an override from the fire department, because ultimately the firefighters have say in this, because they're the ones who are going to have to enter into a 16-story chimney, potentially the stairwell. So this is by no means over. It's just getting started. So if you have any questions on that, I'm happy to fill you in. If you haven't been to our website, just very quickly while I still have the link, landmarkwest.org. Within the first 10 seconds, there's an annoying pop-up, and you can just give us your email. It doesn't cost you a thing, and you can get all of our updates. And if you only care about this issue, just go directly landmarkwest.org/36WEST66, which is the formal address, and you'll see all the background documents and information on this.
Thank you, Sean. What I propose is that, does anybody have any initial questions for Sean?
Is that what they want to understand? We lost the thing with the public buildings, but yet the ultimate result was they did issue an intent to revoke. So
the DOB didn't follow its own rules by issuing the permits in the first place. We said, DOB, follow the rules, and we did a DOB challenge. And they're like, no, that's okay. So we went to the Board of Standards and Appeals for relief, and then the DOB is like, wait, let's check on this. So yes, they backtracked. Oh yeah, this is one of our points. It was completely outlined.
I just wasn't clear. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm still not clear, Sean, on what happened
Department of Buildings issued permits. We didn't like those, so we came back with a DOB challenge. The challenge had 5 arguments. One of them was saying, among the arguments were fire and life safety. The DOB said, well, that's a fire department issue, not us, so denied. One of them was saying that this building has an excessive mechanical for its volume. And they said, well, we haven't approved the plans, so that's denied. We have to do a challenge within a certain number of days because the clock starts ticking once a ZD1 is filed. So we're in this awkward scenario where we're almost too early, but we can't be late. If we're too late, we're out of luck and we can't say anything. So we were too premature. And it was only once this issue escalated to the Board of Standards and Appeals that someone interagency, I am assuming, but I'm projecting here, pushed the hand of the Department of Buildings. You had your hand up first.
What does an intent to revoke mean? Is there a chance that they will rescind that?
There's a potential.
Okay, and if they do revoke it, does everything stop?
It stops until the developer satisfies the concerns. So right now, one of the concerns is the need for this space. And if they say, yes, we do need it, and the DOB buys that, and it's acceptable, that's fine. Someone flicks a switch back on, and our BSA appeal's already filed, we continue with that.
But in the meantime, they can continue building.
They're not building, so they're doing foundation work, and foundations are a freebie. Foundation permits are easy, and you could do foundations and put a 1-story Amazon warehouse on it. So,
Thank you.
John?
Sean, we might want to remind people that they have the permits for the 25-story building.
They have the permits for a 25-story building, and they have an amended foundation plan to cover the whole site. So if they can't technically build their 25-story building on the filed foundation plan, but I guess they could re-amend their foundation plan to then build the fake building, yes.
My question is sort of related to the others, is what happens if they fail and, it gets rejected? What's plan B for the developer? And also, do they have insurance if that happens?
Well, if who fails? If the developer fails in their appeal,
Yeah.
then they have to redesign. They don't have a vested building. They have nothing grandfathered. They have nothing grandfathered, and in fact, these rules that are going through city planning are going to change the rules. So they can't refile mid-challenge for a different building.
And if they have insurance, if it fails? In other words, to make them whole on what they've expended already?
I don't
I'm
care.
just looking at the vacancy rate that we have in the city that they may want to lose in some sense.
You mean the vacancy rate of apartments?
Yeah.
This is 127 units. They're not worried about failing the housing crisis.
What happens if they just ignore it and go ahead and build it anyway and then just take a fine or something?
Well, then they'll never get a C of O, a certificate of occupancy. So anything they would build is at risk, but literally they can't not. If they're going to build beyond the foundations, they're building a 25-story building they have permits for. Otherwise, we call 311 24/7.
You mentioned meetings on February 20th and March 5th, which we can support. How do you go about that?
You can go to the community board. Land use is at the CB7's office at 87th Street. And on the 2nd floor, you can just send me an email, landmarkwest@landmarkwest.org, and I'll give you all the details. I think the times have actually moved unless someone wants to pipe up.
Hi, my name is Paige Carroll. I'm an architect by day, community board member twice a month, and chair of Landmark West. And I just wanted to report, yes, it's going to be a very important meeting on the 5th. We have resolutions, 2 of them, about this project. The most important one, which was the cat was out of the bag on Community Board 5, I think last week. Sean, do you want to talk about what we have been doing in coordinating with all the community boards in Manhattan, since this is now a Manhattan issue?
This is starting off with resolution.
Yes.
CB7 instigated a moratorium on super tall. So super tall by definition is a building 984 feet tall or higher. And they said they wanted a moratorium basically until city planning addressed this, and they're instigating the other Manhattan community boards to sign on as well.
And the issue is that moratoria apparently have been issued in planning projects in the past. It's a little used technique, and this will go before the city council and the borough president. They're all aware of it and all working with us on trying to get this done. And the moratorium would be until there is a full study of all the impacts that Sean has mentioned, to give the agencies who have purview over life safety, light and air, environment, infrastructure, an opportunity to report.
All of having a look?
I want to understand something. They said the mechanicals can be in 25 foot. After that, it has to be 75 foot of residential.
Doesn't have to be well, this is only for residential buildings, so correct.
Then, that's 100 feet. Your building is 700 something feet. Does that mean that there are 7 groups of this going up?
So,
And 7 times 25 is exactly
Okay,
what's
so-
writing.
if I'm a developer, which I'm not, and I wanted to do this, right? Building a floor that I'm not putting anything on is expensive, so I want to limit that. Right now, if I'm the developer who's trying to push this through and everything puts pause, I can still have insane voids. And all of it is correct, and these can repeat every 75 feet. And if he's got 16, 17-story floors at a certain point, 18-foot floors, you can do it every 4 or 5 stories once you go above the threshold of 155 feet. But every time you're doing that, you're taking a loss. And the flip side is, you could have 40-foot ceilings, right? There's just a certain amount, the benefit of what you're gonna, there's a cost ratio of building and infrastructure to sellable floor area.
Voids only apply to mechanical voids, they don't apply to nonsense.
This is so narrow and so limited, it is just mechanical voids.
Yeah, well, then, that's something you have to watch.
I didn't write it, but I agree with you.
Necessity with what you just said about the moratorium. I don't know where, you're saying 984 feet is where a super tall is.
According to the Council on Tall Buildings.
Okay, so you can't begin that at 784 feet.
Well,
Where-
this is what this is all about, is appropriate height in areas, because this building is 3 times the height of what we normally have. Isn't that right, John, on Central Park?
There's a 36-story building that's attached to this building on this block.
Right, so if you look at the height, it's excessive. So the question is, there is no plan on these areas R10, and if you look at the map that comes with this new regulation of voids, it follows an R10, which is an unrestricted height building area. So we have a lot of work to do, because I think you're going to hear from Gail and Lizette that as we get into this, it's a matter of interpretation and the specific areas, because we can't dictate a height for everywhere in Manhattan. We've learned, for instance, that a 25-story building in Inwood up in Washington Heights is the equivalent of our 775 building here. So we're, and I hear laughter from some of my friends and colleagues here, but we're not a one-size-fits-all planning. And the problem is that city planning has refused to plan these areas to see what developers, where it could go. And so I think this whole super tall, it might be that standard, but that number may have to be adjusted, because it implies very different things.